Occupational hazards. Argentine nurse Violet Constance Jessup was aboard RMS Olympic when it collided with another ship in 1911, and also went through the disastrous sinkings of RMS Titanic in 1912 and HMHS Britannic in 1916. Somehow, she survived all three. Jessup was the oldest daughter of Irish immigrants. When her father died, the family moved to England, where she followed her mother's footsteps and enrolled as a stewardess at 21. She started working for the White Star Line shipping company in 1911. Jessup soon boarded the luxury ship RMS Olympic, the largest civilian liner of its time. On September 20th, 1911, the Olympic collided with the British HMS Hawke warship. Despite the damage, the ship got back to port with no fatalities. As Jessup turned 24, she boarded the infamous RMS Titanic. On April 14, 1912, the ship hit an iceberg while crossing the North Atlantic and started sinking. While being lowered onto lifeboat number 16, the stewardess was handed a baby to care for. The survivors were rescued the next day by the RMS Carpathia. Jessup later recalled in her memoirs that an unknown woman took the baby from her and ran off crying. Years later, during World War I, Jessup served for the British Red Cross and was assigned to HMHS Britannic. The vessel had been turned into a hospital ship, and on the morning of November 21, 1916, a sudden explosion startled the passengers. The ship had struck a sea mine and sank within 55 minutes. Jessup lived to tell her story. After she retired, the nurse received a phone call from a woman asking if she had saved a baby from the Titanic. Jessup answered affirmatively, and the voice on the telephone said, quote, "I was that baby." More than luck. Royal Navy officer Wenman Humphrey Wickham Musgrave received torpedo attacks aboard 3 different ships on the same day. A German submarine sank the 3 vessels within an hour, but Wickham survived. Wickham was born in April of 1899 in Barford, England, and studied at the Royal Naval College in Osborne and Dartmouth. On the morning of September 22, 1914, the 15-year-old novice officer was serving as a midshipman aboard the armored cruiser HMS Aboukir. Together with HMS Hogue and HMS Cressy, the 3 warships were on patrol off the Dutch coast when a German U-boat attacked them. Under the command of Captain Lieutenant Otto Wettingen, the Germans first hit the Aboukir. Wickham and other survivors swam away and boarded the Hogue, which had approached them in a rescue attempt. The sailors believed the Aboukir had struck a mine, but the Germans hit the second vessel just as the teenager was being hauled aboard. Wickham jumped into the sea before the Hogue slipped beneath the surface. He swam away once again and approached the Cressy, which had already spotted the submarine and was counterattacking. Silence fell, and the men believed they had driven off the enemy. The captain then began rescue operations, but the U-9 submarine fired its last 2 torpedoes at the Cressy. By 8 a.m., the warship had turtled. 900 sailors were rescued that day, but over 1,000 perished during the hour-long assault. Years later, Wickham's daughter recounted in an interview for the BBC how her exhausted father, quote, eventually found a bit of driftwood, became unconscious, and was eventually picked up by a Dutch trawler. The Unsinkable Cat. After the fierce naval battle that witnessed the sinking of the German battleship Bismarck in May of 1941, over 2,000 sailors lost their lives. 114 survivors were subsequently rescued in the North Atlantic by Allied warships, and among them was Sam the Cat. The crew of HMS Cossack plucked the Bismarck's resident mouser from the ocean and warmly welcomed him aboard. The Cat became part of the crew as they steamed towards the Mediterranean. Months later, the Cossack was escorting a convoy out of the Gibraltar Strait when it was sunk by the German U-563 submarine. This time, everyone on board survived and was rescued by HMS Legion. The fortunate Cat was then adopted by a group of sailors from the HMS Ark Royal. But the carrier was eventually struck by the U-81 submarine near Malta. Only one crew member was rescued from the Mediterranean waters. After the incident, the Lucky Feline's maritime career came to an end. After its adventures at sea, the Cat was brought to Gibraltar and was adopted by the staff of the colony's governor. Sam stayed there until the war ended. The Cat was then taken to Belfast by a sailor until it passed away in 1955 from old age, proving to have many lives to spare. living on the edge. George Pearson Glenn Kidston survived the consecutive sinkings of HMS Aboukir and HMS Hogue, but his luck didn't end there. Kidston would continue this streak throughout his career in the Navy as an aviator and even as a motor racer. As a Royal Navy Lieutenant Commander aboard the HMS Aboukir and Hogue, Kidston was torpedoed twice in the same morning during the action of September 22, 1914, but a civilian trawler saved him. After repatriation, he went on to serve with the British Grand Fleet in the Battle of Jutland in 1916. Kidston survived while running gunnery orders on open deck and being targeted by enemy fire. A veteran sailor, he served on several leading-edge submarines. Kidston cheated death once again in 1925 during test trials of the HMS X-1. The vessel endured mechanical failures due to its gauges being faulty. As it submerged, it embedded itself in the seabed, but was eventually able to resurface. Kidston would later become a naval flight pioneer in addition to his motor racer affairs. In 1929, while traveling from Croydon to Amsterdam in a German airliner along with Prince Eugen von Schaumburg-Lippe, he sensed an imminent crash. Kidston assumed a safe position and enjoyed the impact. Set on fire, Kidston kicked the fuselage and doused himself in the wet grass. He tried to save the prince and others, but the flames were unforgiving. 2 years later, his good luck finally ended. After breaking a record by flying from Wilshire to South Africa in his own specially adapted Lockheed Vega monoplane in only 6.5 days, Kidston never made the return trip. While flying a borrowed de Havilland Puss Moth over the Drakensberg Mountains, a dust storm broke up the aircraft in midair. By the time of his demise, the Le Mans race winner had had plenty of near misses in airplane, motorcycle, speedboat, and submarine accidents. His gravestone reads, "Time and tide wait for no man." Castaway. Chinese sailor Poon Lim was working as a steward on the British merchant ship SS Ben Lomond when the vessel was sunk by the German U-172 submarine. Lim then swam for about 2 hours until he found a wooden raft with supplies. He was rescued 133 days later by Brazilian fishermen, the longest anyone has ever survived on a life raft at open sea. On November 23, 1942, 2 torpedoes hit the SS Ben Lomond, 750 miles east of Brazil. The ship was armed, but sailing slowly on its own. Lim quickly put on a life jacket and jumped overboard before the boilers exploded. The ship sank within 2 minutes, allowing only 6 passengers to abandon it on time. Lim then swam for approximately 2 hours until he found an 8-square-foot raft and climbed aboard. He was delighted to discover biscuits, chocolate, and 11 gallons of water inside, as well as sugar lumps. There were also flares, smoke pots, and a flashlight. When his supplies ran out, Lim used his wit and the tools on hand to fish and catch rainwater. The steward used a wire from the flashlight to fashion a fishing hook and some hemp rope to create a fishing line. He also dug a nail out of the boards to use for larger fish and cut them open with a knife he forged out of a biscuit tin. Lim was even able to catch sharks and feed on them, sometimes even drinking their blood to quench his thirst. The Castaway was passed by several ships, but was not rescued. German U-boats used to employ survivor baits to compel ships to approach and become easy targets. As he reached the shore, Lim was taken to Belém and ultimately to the UK. He was later awarded a British Empire Medal, and the Royal Navy incorporated his survival techniques into their own manuals. When told that he had the record for the longest time spent at sea on a raft, Lim replied, quote, "I hope no one will ever have to break that record." If you liked this video, please subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels for more anecdotes and incredible adventures. And if you know of more awe-inspiring survival stories, please don't hesitate to tell us in the comments below.